Hello, and welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I am the producer, Jason Lewis. I would like to thank you for tuning in to the From the Shadows podcast, and without further ado, here is your host, Shane Grove.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shane Grove, host of From the Shadows podcast, and joining me this morning, we have a full house, and I can tell it's a full house because it's warm in here. For some reason, the air conditioning's not working.
I warned you.
And I'm blaming the judge.
I believe it's just because you're next to Elisa. I think that's why you're warm.
Oh my God.
And I'm between the heat of her and Jerry. Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh, that's it.
Okay.
It's Latin heat, man. It's Latin heat.
Okay. So I'm not even going to introduce everybody this morning because everybody's here. And even Jerry.
Hello, everyone.
And Elisa's mom is hiding in the corner.
But she
Keeping
did
an eye
bring
on
them.
Jerry.
Is she off? Yeah, she brought donuts.
Just keeping an eye on Jerry.
So we're going to dive right in today to a very special guest because we want to talk about a subject that most of our loyal listeners, if you have been listening from the beginning and gone back, the judge had a very frightening dogman experience when we were in high school. He's just now really started to discover what it was all about and talk about it because he didn't want to face the ridicule of me, mainly, when we were younger. So, with that being said, our guest today is Bryan Bowden, who is probably the biggest dogman expert this side of the Mississippi, I would say. Yes? No? Bryan, are you going to lay claim to that?
No. There's no experts in this field. If anybody tells you they're an expert, run.
Well, you just ruined everything that I set up. I can't believe
Well,
you did
no,
it.
I appreciate it, but I will tell you straight up, as a research investigator, I'm not an expert. I'm a researcher investigator. I'm boots on the ground. Everybody has their own little more experience in X, Y, and Z. I've had experience in all of the X, Y, and Z, but I don't consider myself an expert on it. Constant knowledge. You got to keep constantly researching these things. So there's no true experts on this. There's experiencers. I've had tons of experience with these different type of cryptids and spirits and what have you, but I don't believe in any experts. I don't like the term. People use that too quickly. I appreciate it. It's nice accolades, but I don't think I've ever met an expert. I know people that are really knowledgeable in it, and that's what I would always say about anything in the field. An expert is someone who probably has a dogman in their house and they're studying it, which I don't think anybody does.
Well, that is probably the nicest way anybody's ever called me a liar. So thank you very much.
Well,
I appreciate it. I thank you very much, but I never like to use the term expert because it's an expert is someone who's just that's all they study, that's all they do, and they're like scientists, researchers. I was trained a bit in science for physics and at one point I thought, oh, maybe I'll be an astrophysicist, and then I realized I'll be working at 7-Eleven. So, there's no money in that, but I do have some science background, and I try to impart that into what I do, but I can just tell you from my own experience and my deductions, I have a ton of hypotheses, but I'm not an expert. I don't want to I'm not even discrediting myself, I'm just telling straight up the truth. There's too many people that are making stuff up in this field that are, want to roll your head.
What's interesting is when I was a kid and I had my dogman experience, I had no idea what I was looking at, what was going on. I didn't want to tell people. I told people the story. I didn't want to tell them exactly what I saw because of, ridicule, make fun of, and things like that. Mm-hmm. But what's really cool about what you're doing is the North American Dogman Project is a forum by which people who have experiences can reach out and find like-minded people, and that didn't exist in the 80s. That didn't exist, and really for me, it took me until the last several years to really kind of delve in and find out that there's these creatures out there, that this wasn't just something one and done.
Right.
And so it's really cool that people nowadays who have an experience now have a form by which they can contact people who are boots on the ground. That's what I really like about you guys, that you're boots on the ground doing investigations. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the North American Dogman Project, because we have listeners out there that are Dogman fans.
Well, first, Brian, give us a little background about you, so everybody kind of understands how you got it. Because I started to read your bio, and I could not get past the fact, and I think I sent you the text that you're literally the cryptid paranormal version of George Costanza, because you started out wanting to be an architect. And you always wanted to be an architect, and I hope there's Seinfeld fans out there to get that reference. But so, I mean, this bio is super impressive. So, I mean, if you want to give everybody the condensed version, so they know kind of how you got into why we have you on the show.
Right. So I started out. I was always into science. I love science. I love space and exploration, and I'm older than most people apparently now. So I started out with loving monster movies, talking about spaceship and aliens, and this program that was on at one point, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, called In Search Of, which had all this crazy stuff on it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you pick, they talk about Bigfoot, and they talk about Loch Ness Monster, and never talked about werewolves, by the way. Ghosts, demons, whatever. So I was always into this, and I was always into the space shuttle and space travel. And when Voyager was sent out, it was like, cool, we're going to make contact with aliens, what have you. So I always had a science background, and I liked architecture and engineering at one point. And I was thinking about being an architect. I was toying with that and something with physics, because I like the science aspect of it, maybe astrophysics or whatever. But boils down to making money. And that's what you got to do. And you kind of can't make money. You'd be working in a university. You'd have to publish papers, and if people didn't like them or whatever. So I kind of started a company where I was doing drafting work for a lot of people, a lot of designers and architects. And with that, I got more into the business side of it. So I worked on Wall Street for about 20 years, some of the top firms on trading floors. But I was always doing this side research on, UFOs, aliens, and crazy things. And that's what brought me over to really, I still do, I have a think tank, and we have a marketing company called BRE Promotions, where we will make you T-shirts, hats, stickers, banners. We'll wrap your car, we'll wrap your kids, whatever. But I'm also, we don't care. We'll just wrap them up, You could put the podcast right on your children. We'll just bring them over to our shop and wrap them. But I still,
What's the address we can send? We'll send them over right now.
You got it. It's a New Jersey, actually, but
even better.
Yeah, get them out of the state. But what I have is I actually have my wife. When we were dating, she's seen some things. And to this day, she still doesn't want to admit to what she's seeing, because she's one of those non-believers. But she gives me the ability to continue to go out. And I used to go out with a group called Bronxville Paranormal, and I still kind of do. We're working things out, because the guy that founded Al Santoriga says he's retired, but I'm not going to let him. He has news. So, Al, you're coming out again. But we started investigating all this stuff. But I've always been investigating. I've been investigating UFOs for decades. I've been investigating Bigfoot for a long time, close to a couple of decades. I initially started where I thought everything was on the Pacific Northwest, right? Everything's out there. That's where the Goblin film is and all that stuff. I didn't even think there was any Bigfoots in this area on the East Coast. And lo and behold, there's a lot of Bigfoots. And there's a lot of Bigfoots in New York State, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the Appalachian Trail along, the whole stretch pretty much. And then once you start researching it, it just went from there. I do podcasting. I have Inside the Goblin Universe with Ron Murphy, or as they call him, the Crypto Guru. And we host a show. We do a bunch of different things with that. And then I also do my own show because, look, paranormal's fun and it's great, but I also like music. I like art, poetry, interesting things. And so I did a show called Nobobume, which stands for Nobody But Me. And we just get people on that show. So this is me in a nutshell, where I'm constantly researching stuff. to the point where I used to carry a K2 meter with me everywhere I went. And my paranormal brother Al, we went to his wedding, and he goes, "Don't mess around at the wedding." So as he's walking him and his daughter down the aisle, I went over to him. I said, I did a, and he looked down. And I said, I showed him my K2 meter, and he just shook his head.
Jeez.
You got it,
Yeah.
So once an investigator, always an investigator.
Well, that's so there, everybody. Now, if you're out of breath from telling us, I mean, that's impressive, though. That's why you're on the show, because of your passion and dedication.
Wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, wealth of knowledge. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. Getting just one more thing, just to address the North American Dogman Project. I did not start that. That was started by Jody Cook and, he's going to kill me, another guy, I forgot his name right off the bat, but they're the ones that started. That was their focus, because no one else had it. Everybody had the Bigfoot stuff, but no one was talking about Dogman. And initially, I got to be honest, when I heard Dogman, my buddy Al was like, "Dude, you got to listen to this. You got to hear this stuff." I'm like, werewolves? Really? Because I thought it was, I got to be honest, thought it was crap. No such thing as werewolves. And then you start listening to it, and then you start interviewing people individually outside of this, off the record that work military or some other end of the, where they have more to lose than gain. And you start hearing things, you start questioning, and then you have your own experiences, and you're like, okay, so there's a werewolf now. That's something I wanted to know was true or not.
Right. Well, let's get into it. Talk to us about the North American Dogman Project, and what you have learned, from your research.
Well, when you hear about people talking about this cryptid creature, and Judge, I did hear your story. Thanks. Shane sent me an episode where you told your story, which was pretty fascinating, and I'm going to probably say you got very lucky that day, because you were being, I think in general, you were being pursued by that creature that came out of the woods, and you said that it looked like Anubis, and that is the greatest definition, explanation. If people really want to know, there's two things I say to people regarding, well, what's a dogman? Dogman is a name given by Linda Godfrey, Land Between the Lakes, frame and all that stuff, because they said it looked like a dog on its hind legs. It's basically a werewolf, a lichen, or it looks something like the Van Helsing creature of werewolves, or American Werewolf in London type of werewolf, or it has an Anubis type quality to it, where you have this big, muscular body that's almost a bipedal, human-esque with lots of hair and claws, and this head of a dog, German Shepherd, or something of the like, hyena, German Shepherd, that type of thing.
And being a student of early Wolfman movies with Lon Chaney, when I saw this thing, it never resonated with me, werewolf, because I imagined the flat face of a man and wearing a tattered plaid shirt and a pair of jeans, running around. And so for years, I secretly researched what in the heck was it that I saw. Never once thought werewolf.
Are you sure it wasn't Grover?
Right.
He couldn't run that fast, trust me.
Oh, geez. For short periods of time.
Because you people throughout time have talked and discussed Bigfoot, Sasquatch. The indigenous people throughout the world have discussed Sasquatch. I mean, that's always been at the forefront of this type of cryptid thing. A bipedal, hairy man with apish quality to it, or in that realm, that lives in the woods. No one's really discussed publicly that there's this creature that's kind of wolf-esque or hyena-esque, and has the shape and body of a man. It really wasn't discussed that much. But as more and more of these sightings are coming out, now it's the new, in thing. It's the hot potato. This is what people are seeing. Now, I'm going to go so far to say that of the sightings you hear reported, I'm going to give it an 80-20 split. 80% are probably real sightings and 20% are hyperbole on this cryptid. This cryptid varies in like 7 different variants that's been broken down into about 7 variants, from something that looks like a type 1, which is like a canine-looking variant, really like a wolf. Think wolf, werewolf, like a dog werewolf. Those type 2 variant, which is more hyena-esque, to a 3 type variant, which is more like that wolf, werewolf in Van Helsing, that werewolf soldier that's like 12 feet tall. There's also ones that look a little bit like, I'm going to say like a combination of a cheetah and a leopard, or something to that effect. And then you get into the type 3 variants, which run the gamut from like a deformed Bigfoot monkey to a baboon, with a middle one being really, really evil-looking mad dog. And it depends on where you are and what you're looking at, because I always thought initially when you're going out into this field, there's going to be variations of these things anyhow. It's in human nature. Like, look, we're more Caucasian in this country than, let's say, in Asia. There's certain different breaks down different characteristics. So throughout human history, there's going to be certain changes that distinguish us from each other. But ultimately, they're all lumped into the dogman category because it acts more like that werewolf.
So are you saying there was more like breeds? Like in canines, we have different breeds. That in the dogman phenomena, there's different breeds of dogman.
I think there are not only different breeds, or we'll call them variants because that's what they've been using, but there's also different roles, different stages. See, a lot of the dogman stories we hear, first of all, dogmen in general, they don't hunt alone. So that's why I said you got lucky. You were running, when you were running and you were doing the pacing, you're hearing this thing keeping pace with you. It was no effort for this creature to keep pace with you.
Right.
At all.
Absolutely.
At all. I mean, it's insane what these things can do. These things can leap 60 feet without even thinking about it. But in general, if you have a dogman, if you come up on a road, you're walking in the woods, you're hunting, whatever it is, and you come up and this thing steps out in front of you, I will guarantee you have one behind you, or one creeping around behind you. They never, ever are alone.
That was the theory, that was a theory that when years later I was on an airplane actually talking to some guy who had actually hunted wolves, and that was his theory. He's like, look, you were being pushed. His thing was, wolves don't like to attack anything of size by themselves. They're scared they'd get hurt, not be able to run with the pack. And so what his theory was, this thing was pushing me towards the pack, or however big the pack was. And I was very lucky that I turned right and went to my buddy's house versus turned left, because if I'd have turned left, I probably would. They would have ran me right into it.
Yeah, that what they like to do is they like to steer in that direction. You were perfect prey. You were a runner. You're lean. It's all muscle. There's very little fat on you, right?
Not anymore.
Let's talk.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, so as far as animal smelling protein and stuff like that, yeah, I'd have been
I mean,
easy.
Right now, he's probably feeding the whole pack for at least 2 months. Hey, but I want to ask, and maybe this is a question that some of our listeners that are not familiar with this subject. So, do you believe that the dogman, then, we're talking about a creature that solely exists as a dogman type creature, not the one that we've seen in the movies,
not metamorphosing from man.
Yeah, this isn't
back to
like
man.
This isn't some curse that somebody turns into, which is, we can do another Seinfeld reference where Jerry shaves his chest and and it grows back in and he becomes can't stop the scratching and itching. But is that what we're talking? We're talking about this is
biological creature.
Yeah, biological creature that When we call it Dogman, it's only because it appears to
Be bipedal.
be bipedal, not that it's half man.
Or is it?
Well, I think that when you get into the subject of these cryptids, these dogmen, the physical, the physical traits of these things, as well as into the Sasquatch Bigfoot, I think you're almost getting like a missing link type of thing here. I think there is a development. There may have been a crossover between the human gene and these things that created this end of the creature. Maybe this was created prior to humans, and we are the end result of genetic manipulation. I don't know. That's a theory, okay? But I think that if we had hairs from this creature, definitive hairs, like someone grabbed a whole bunch of it while it was being attacked, and here, I got these hairs from it. I think you would find that the DNA and RNA in it had some human qualities to it, where you'd say, well, I'm getting human. And it would be something there that says, well, I'm getting human stuff, but I'm also getting dog stuff, so you probably had something rub up against you. I think there is something to this cryptid that has a human quality. I definitely believe this thing does not transform. I'm talking about from your typical, like I see Lon Chaney Jr. transforming in the moonlight, and the hair is growing on his face, or in American Werewolf in London, the snout comes out. I don't think it does that. It's not that. This is its own entity, own species. And initially, I didn't think of any of these things, they're calling it woo now, but it's really embarrassing, and I find it disgusting that people call it the woo, because you get ridiculed for believing this stuff to begin with, right? They put you in that special yellow bus because he believes in UFOs.
The short bus. The short bus, yes.
Well, no, they put you in a shorter bus now because people don't believe in the woo. So now, not only are you mentally challenged, you're like the king of mentally challenged. Like that special bus.
It's good to be the king.
Is its own. Yeah, it's always good to be the king. Another Seinfeld reference.
Okay, I was wondering. Yeah, I was wondering about, you were talking earlier about the different variants of this creature.
Right.
Do you think that they developed sort of like a doggish, like one that may look like a Anubis type of character in one area versus, say, another part of the world? It might look more like a baboonish kind of face or something. Do you think it's like regional, how it developed because it developed to adapt to live in its environment? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, if you want to talk about evolution, I think what happens is that it's really interesting how animals and nature will find a way to survive. And maybe we only use like 3% of our brain, right?
Right.
So if we use imagine what we could do if we use 5%, and imagine if we have the ability to use 90%. What are the possibilities that we are capable of doing that we have yet to unlock? So this is where we get into the woo factor or the craziness factor. I think the abilities are genetically that this creature has and is aware of, can be a metamorphosis type of thing where you are not physically, going from a human to an animal, but you have the ability to adapt for your survival needs, like what you just said, depending on the region. And also, I think it also takes, if you consider like where these things are primarily growing up or existing in, starting out, they're going to, maybe there was a relationship between something that was pre-dogman to like a pre-human, like Cro-Magnon, person or Neanderthal. They talk about Gigantopithecus all the time, and where they know that this thing is bred with the human side of things. So we've had certain relations there, and those have offspring. Who knows what happens during that process, that procreation process? It could have been that process that bred these things out, where someone's having an intimate interaction with another creature, and somehow the DNA and RNA just get, boom, it matches, and they produce offspring. And then over time, these things start to get produced. I don't know. I mean, we don't have anything concrete, a physical specimen that's in public hands. I'm not I thoroughly believe that our government is aware of all these things. They have, they have species of all these things, and they know exactly what they are. That's why it's very secretive. I mean, the national parks bring in a ton of money, correct?
Yes.
How likely you're going to bring your kids to Yellowstone or Yosemite if you know that there's this 12-foot bipedal werewolf looking thing that would want to munch on your children?
And it's hard enough to talk about. It's hard enough to get people to go to Cedar Point knowing Jerry's.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine.
Don't worry, kids love me.
Kids love me.
So this thing, I think this thing has abilities that will blow your mind. I think this thing has the ability. I keep getting crap for it, but I don't care. I'm going to say it straight up. I think there's an interdimensional aspect to this creature, and it has the ability to use whatever technology it has or its own abilities to blend into surroundings, to dematerialize in front of your face. It looks like it's dematerializing, but maybe cloaking itself to travel into and out to other dimensions, just like Sasquatch.
Well,
That's fascinating.
Most animals in general have a way of cloaking themselves into their natural habitat, whether it's, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's interdimensional,
Well,
travel,
especially predators. Predators that, they're amazing at camouflaging themselves.
Yeah. They're not going out there in the woods like us with bright orange.
Right.
Hats on and stuff. Here I am. Don't eat me.
So,
go ahead.
Let's just say that someone thinks they have a Dogman experience and they contacted the North American Dogman Project. What would you guys do?
Well, I volunteered Al and myself for New York State. It's a huge state. We have a couple other areas in Western New York that have another director there because we're all co-directors, but we can't handle the entire state. I mean, to go from where I am in the city area to like West PA, 8, 9, 12 hours. It depends. So we have a variety of different investigators. If you contact us, we take this information and we're going to go and do a preliminary investigation with an individual. We're going to interview you. We keep all your information confidential. We don't report it, to anybody. It gets reported back to the center, which is just the North American Dogman Project. That governs everything for the most part. But then we go out and we investigate. And we'll get a group of guys together, guys and girls and whatever. We go out, we go to the location that it's happened. We try to do at least a 3-day run on it. Sometimes it's difficult, but we'll try to monitor the situation for about 24 hours to see what it's like during the day and during the night. We look for your atypical tracks, scat, hair samples. We take audio, video, FLIR. We use full spectrum, and we try to capture evidence that this creature is actually there.
I wouldn't jump in there, and I think that's a great idea. One of the things that always drove me nuts, and I'm a big Josh Gates fan.
I love Josh Gates.
But Josh they go out there Destination Truth, and they spend 12 hours trying to find something. It's like, dude, you got to be there for days and weeks.
He's a big star. He doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do.
I get it, but that's the difference between really doing an investigation versus trying to put on a
So
TV
now he
show.
called out Josh Gates.
I'm not calling out Josh Gates. I love Josh Gates. But in theory, you can't do a TV show where Josh is out in the field for a week at a time. You know what I mean?
Well,
so go ahead.
So one of my friends growing up is actually is director of photography, Evan Stone, and I didn't find that out until because we didn't have all the social media. So when we were growing up, if you didn't have phone numbers or whatever, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So I actually noticed there was an episode in Gates where they go to the Hubunchku Forest, and Evan, the cameraman, is Evan B. Stone, who's a great guy, great family. He gets lifted up off the ground. I mean, like physically pulled out off the ground. He was a bigger guy back then. So the way TV works is this: you're seeing what looks like 24 hours, but they've been there longer than that.
Really?
They're just giving you whatever the highlights. Yeah. When he went to Nepal, you don't go for just 3 days. It's not like going to Club Med,
Right.
It takes a long time to get to Nepal. It's very high up. You have to adjust. So they are there for longer periods, but, it's not like everything's just popping and, rocket out there. Oh, look, there's a Yeti, and there's one too. Ooh, it takes a longer period of time. He's got to travel by foot. A lot of these destinations that group goes to, it's hard to go. These guys are hoofing it. Of course you want to get there quicker, but it's just you're limited by the weight.
Well, now you know why
we'll
never have a TV show is because the judge can't commit to more than 12 hours because that's in his mind what it took. So thanks, you screwed us from ever having a TV show. Thanks.
At least you guys have a chance.
As far as TV shows are concerned, I'm with Corridor 13, which is a talent appearance agency, but they also do movies.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that put out Expedition Bigfoot this year.
Yeah,
So
Russell
what
and
they went there for 3
Rebecca,
weeks.
Dr. Foster and all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, they were there
So-
3 weeks.
so-
Right.
Yeah, so they went out there and they're using what I loved about the program prior for me signing with them and being part of their group. I like the fact that they used science and data and information to correlate most likely spots these things have been seen, and then they camped there for about a month, 3 weeks to a month, and they kept going out and doing these things, and they kept using better equipment like FLIRs and LiDAR and something to that nature. That was a very, very good series for that. But most of these other things, you're filming for TV, so they have cut scenes, they know exactly the B-roll, they know the A-roll, they know what they want to talk about. They go back in and the editor puts it together and makes it look exciting. You're correct. You need to be able to go on an investigation in an area constantly, months at a time.
So taking this back to the
it would be
original
great.
question about when you guys go out 3 days, you're bringing all your equipment. Tell us some interesting stories that you found through your guys' investigations.
Well, I happen to send you some photos.
Yes, we
looked at
them. Yeah.
So something that's very interesting. I'll go into a specific investigation because it was a culmination of months over time. We did a day-night investigation in New York State at a place of high strangeness. And what happens is the facility, it's called Nuclear Lake. And the reason why it's called Nuclear Lake is at one point back in the 70s, United Nuclear Corporation got permission from the U.S. government to work with weapons-grade plutonium and uranium to craft an engine or a fuel cell.
So this is the beginning of an awesome B horror movie. So
Yeah, it
I'm
was
taking notes right
100%.
now.
Yeah, so
More
in
superhero
this
origin
lake,
came
so
to mind.
they put it up in this lake area there, and to get in, you have to walk about a mile to get in, just to get to the tip of where the lake starts. The lake is about from point to the beginning to the top of the lake. You're looking at about 2 miles, and there's 2 different trails you can take. If you go to the right side, it's more like a goat trail, rocky. You'll kill yourself. To the left, that's where they put the facility. They had an accident there. There was an explosion and a fire. The radiation leaked into the lake, and the government said that they cleaned it up and put air quotes in that.
I work for
They
the
cleaned
government.
it up.
They're liars. So just so we get
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
I think we all work for the government, but that's a different story.
Okay.
But so what they did was they cleaned it up, and then they made it into a park. Because nothing says let's picnic near radioactive waste like that.
Sounds like a horror movie.
So
I already said that. I
I-
already said it looks like a horror movie. It keeps getting better.
Exactly. So there's high strangeness in the area to begin with. There's been Native American talk about apparitions, kind of like that predator type of like seeing things moving in that nature where
The
it
shimmer,
cloaks
like
itself.
the shimmer effect there.
Yeah, the shimmer. There's talks about spirits, and you're talking about elementals and the guardians of the forest. There's been Bigfoot sightings up there, and what's interesting is the Appalachian Trail kind of cuts through a little bit of that property every once in a while. So we went up there because the guy that founded Bronxville Paranormal Society, my buddy, he lives close by. So he's been going there for years, and he's been having these really weird experiences here, and monkey bark, chatter, wood knocks, rock knocks. So, and then he went on an investigation one time, and he found these quartz stones that looked like they were balls, that like shaped into balls, not smooth or anything, but not a natural formation. It looked like someone purposely made it round, and that was at the tip of the lake, the top part of the lake, in an area that's away from everybody. So we did a day-night investigation on Halloween. It was the perfect storm. There was a meteor shower that night, full moon. There was no precipitation whatsoever, and the plan was to go in and go and
remember. There's a reason. There's a reason you're riding a short bus. Okay, go ahead. because picking.
So three of us go in there, right? And I don't have any weapons. I live in New York City. It's difficult enough to get a firearm. I want one because I love target shooting, and I have two daughters, so you need to have those. But it makes it virtually impossible. And second is, you take a firearm onto federal land, you're looking at a minimum of a year mandatory in jail for just that crime alone. So even if I did have firearms, I would never have brought it with me whatsoever. So we had machetes and a couple of knives. And we started out, we hooked it in. On the way there are these Karens, which are, you see them, some of the hikers make them, but it's like a pile of stones, and sometimes they make them into a pyramid, or they just stack them on top of each other and make weird things. If you go up to Canada, they're called a Nukashuk, and they're stone statues made of man. It's almost a spirit piece to ward off bad, to warn people that there are things here that are strange, on the high strangeness thing, and it's also a protection type of thing. So we're seeing these things built on top of these rocks that are at least 20 feet tall. It's very hard to get to. There's no reason or rhyme for anybody to go up there to make that rock like that, and these are weird structures. We finally make our way into the one spot where they found these stones, and we set up. There's three of us. There's a guy, Bill, who is videotaping. He had his own YouTube show at one point. Al, the head of the group, and myself. And that's literally, the only people that were there. And we make our camp over by these stones, and, we set ourselves up with these little chairs we put down. No fire whatsoever, because we don't want to call anybody's attention. And we start doing some investigative work. So we're using parabolic mic to hear anything strange sounds or anything, closer up. And they're getting these sounds that sound almost like a Morse code type of thing coming in. And as they point it from the ground up along these trees, it gets louder as they get higher. So the possibility that there was sound being generated in that area, military is still there, because no one really knows if they cleaned up everything. It could be coming from outer space at this point, because we don't know, off planet. But my theory is that because if you take into consideration when this nuclear accident happened and how many years later we're back there, the tree would have been about, yay high. So you may be catching residual radiation type of signatures on the product. So that was one experiment. Then we test magnetic fields. We test for radiation using Geiger counters. We did an experiment at one point where I have a crystal skull. His name is Scully. I carry him with me. He's a small crystal skull. My buddy had a rose quartz crystal. So we put him down by these rocks, and we started hitting them with temperature readings. We looked for magnetic anomalies through your K2 meters and other type of electronic testing equipment, and we got nothing. And we kept on doing our own little thing. You'd hear dogs barking in the distance, and very little wildlife sounds. You get a couple of ducks every once in a while, maybe a ribbit, but that was it. As the night started getting, going into the night, you could feel it. Like, you could smell it, you could taste it, you could feel it. This pressure started to build. And then we busted out and opened up and started using our old favorite, the Tibetan singing bowls. And we have our own Tibetan singing bowl.
I was
We
waiting
have
for you to
an
say
app
you took your shirts off and covered yourself in hot sauce, because that would be
No.
okay.
That wasn't happening. It was a little bit too chilly for that. So we're at this spot. There's nowhere. It's getting darker, and let me tell you, when it gets pitch black there, you can't run any place without a light. You'll kill yourself. You'll poke your eye out, and you'll die. One area is the only way out from that spot is to hoof it out and make sure you have a good light, or if you dare jump in that lake that has some of the craziest radiation still probably in there, and some alligator bass or something like that are ginormous.
Oh.
They literally they eat, fowl. Birds come up, and people have seen these things pull them into the lake. So it's kind of like The Simpsons, like strange stuff.
So there's like 5 eyes and 2.
Yeah. So we start using the Tibetan singing bowl, and the energy starts ramping up. I mean, it's kind of like if you've ever been outside and you know that the rain's going to come, a storm's coming, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it.
Yeah.
The electricity in the air, it just ramps up, and there's a pressure, and everybody's a little bit more on edge. We call our psychic, who's in Arkansas, and when we're talking to the psychic, it sounds as if she has marbles in her mouth. She cannot speak, like she has Bell's palsy. And it's all garbled, and she's like, I don't know what's going on. It's weird. It's something's not right there. So once we used the Tibetan singing bowls, we started looking again at these 2 crystal skulls. We're thinking maybe there's going to be an interaction there. The heat starts radiating heat off of them. We start getting spikes on our EMF meter. I'm like, okay, cool. This is ramping up. So we're good. We start, we had to hang up on her because we just couldn't understand what she was saying. It was so jumbled that it was crazy. We continue to do some more experiments. We do wood knocks. We do, against the trees. And the dogs that were barking at one point just shut up the minute we do a tree knock. So this is very interesting. Now, around the area where we are, it's dark now. We keep hearing something walking big on the leaf litter. And we're thinking, well, you got bear up there, you got the big cat up there, and, you also have deer, but this is heavier than deer. And the way I can describe it is if you've ever been to an outdoor fair where they have, like, circus animals, even cattle, you can feel the weight of the cattle. When they're walking on the ground, you kind of can feel it if you're really paying attention. This thing felt like a ginormous elephant was walking on the ground. And it was kind of tiptoeing, and my buddy's listening to the parabolic mic, and he hears it even louder. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, yeah, there's something big walking around here. And before you know it, we're getting responses now from the tree knocks. And we hit the tree, and then we get a response. And we get a response across us from the lake, on the other side of that little spot by the lake, and there's a tree knock back. Then we hear 2 rock knocks, and we're paying attention to that. We try to do a rock knock, but we don't have the rocks to do it. We counter with a tree knock. The next thing you know, if you're visually seeing us, Al's going to be in the center. I'm going to be sitting to the right, about 15 feet away from him, 10 to 15 feet away from him, and about 10 feet away from Al to the left is this guy, Bill. And Bill's sitting there, and he's filming. I'm doing some stuff with, trying to do Twitter live streaming. Very bad signals. The next thing you know, we get a bluff charge behind Bill. Bill gets up, and he runs. He runs at us. Al grabs him because Bill was like, I'm going. I'm done. He would have been killed. He would have lost his eye. He would have been dead.
And you pulled out your butter knife. I literally had that machete out. I had the machete out, and your heart's pumping because something literally ran up towards him. It was a bluff charge. So we know bear do it, but this is bigger than a bear. So we're videotaping everything. We have FLIR there. We have full spectrum. We have low lights. We have everything we can have for a small group. We don't we use our own funds to buy our equipment. And we're getting nothing on this stuff. So then he calms down. We stand our ground, and it stops. The next,
We go back, we're sitting down, we're just paying attention, we're listening. The next thing you hear is as if it was standing right next to you, whoop, whoop, and then a second later, whoop, down about 2 miles at the other end of the lake. And let me tell you something, this whoops reverberated in my chest. This was right near us. And after that, we were pretty much up that night. We didn't need any more coffee at this point. We stood our ground. and we're like, we literally heard the whoops as if there's a great whoop in the Sierra sounds from Ronald Moorhead. It sounded exactly like that, but it reverberated off your chest. And there is no way that it can go from point A, where we are, to point B 2 miles down the road. It did it in a split second, literally like a second. It went, so at that point, we're like, okay, this is really strange. This is odd. We're all on edge. And the moment that whoops happened, everything, and the last whoop, it started to die down, the tension and everything. So they were trying to figure out what did that, why did it do it? And I was saying that what did that was, I'm going to say it's a bipedal cryptid. I'm going with Bigfoot. 2, the reason why it did whoop, whoop, whoop is because there's 3 of us, and it was telling the other ones he was communicating with, which were directly opposite us on the other shore of this lake. We were at the tip of the top tip. We were on the right side there. This was coming from the left side of that lake. And it was saying, don't go there. There's 3 of them. You can't go that way. It was doing recon, okay? Which is, pretty much a valid theory. Because we didn't leave, the last action between this cryptid and us as a group, after those whoops, we ran up on that hill where it was coming from. Lights blaring. This guy had like a 3 million candle watt power light. There was nothing on the FLIR, nothing on full spectrum, nothing on any camera. I mean, and there's no way you could go any place because it's all woods behind this little hill that was right behind us. And we didn't find anything at this point. We sit back down for a few more minutes, and the next thing you know, you hear a thud. It's right behind my chair. Something massive is thrown through the woods, and you hear some break. It lands right behind my chair, rolls 2-3 times, hits my chair, and knocks me out of my chair. And it was a big boulder, like a stone. Like if I had to pick that up, it'd probably be about 300 pounds. It was that big.
Now, if you just said it was a bigger crystal skull, I would.
That would have been great.
That would have been.
So let me ask you this. This is a subject that sometimes people have asked me, and of course, I don't have the wealth of research. Bigfoot, Dogman, do they coexist in the same territory, or do they compete for the same food source? Do they fight? What's your thoughts?
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time that we have for this week's episode. Make sure that you tune in next week when we will continue this amazing interview with Bryan Bowden. And oh yes, we will find out his take on the theory of competition between the Dogman and Bigfoot, and more. Until next time, never fear what may be lurking within the darkness. See ya.